Hi, and welcome back to the HE Enable podcast. This is the show all about sharing our experiences of disability, neurodivergence, and long-term health conditions in the UK higher education system. I'm Cath, and this week I am joined by Luisa. She studied architecture in the UK and is now one of the directors of the Neurodiversity Architecture Network, an international community of neurodivergent architects, architecture students, and educators. We met a couple of months ago at an event in person, and I've been really excited about having her on the show since, so I want to get this started. Hey Louisa, how's it going?
Hello, how are you? I'm good.
I'm good, thank you. Please could you introduce yourself a little for the listeners and share a little bit about your background in higher education?
Yes, sure. So, hi everyone. My name is Luisa, and I studied architecture at Kent School of Architecture for my Part 1 bachelor's and at Oxford Brookes University for my Part 2 master's. And I later did a second master's in urbanism at the Architectural Association Design Research Lab. I'm also the founder of NAN, Neurodiversity Architecture Network.
That's so exciting. We'll speak about NAN a little bit later, but today we'll focus on your experiences primarily in higher education, but we'll definitely plug that later.
Yeah, sure.
So, if you are comfortable saying, how did your disabilities impact your experience of higher education?
I think my experience of higher education, it was a mixed one. So for my bachelor's, which I did at Kent, I had generally a good experience. I felt accommodated, I felt welcomed. At the time, I had just come off high school. It was my first time abroad. And I was amongst people who were experiencing similar things at the time. And my depression and anxiety had gone down. So I actually felt welcomed, and I didn't feel as disabled by society as one would normally. But for my master's part 2, I had a good first year, but the second year was really bumpy. And I guess that it's because there are so many variables at play that sometimes those variables don't turn out in your favor and you're more affected by them. One of those variables was the fact that I was an international student, and I found myself at a disadvantage because I was unaware of certain legal definitions, such as the definition of disability in the Equality Act and what support I could get access to, given that, according to the Equality Act, I was disabled because of my depression and GAD diagnosis. Um, so, for a bit of context, I had depression and GAD since the age of 15. And I've always had adjustments at school if they were necessary. Like, my psychiatrist would send off a letter, and everyone, like the teachers, would make sure I was being attended to in terms of adjustments. However, when transitioning to university, I became unaware of the support systems. And for reference, I didn't do my high school here in the UK. I did it in Germany. So when I moved, I moved away from the support systems that I had set in place back home. The thing that affects me most, though, in general, are actually social interactions. So I was at uni in my part 2. I was excelling academically, and I was doing really well with the work, and I'm passionate about my work as well, until the social realm kind of took over my academic realm. So those social interactions really impacted me. I didn't necessarily need adjustments. I needed people to stop bullying and start behaving properly around each other. But also, as an international student, I did not have family in the country. So my support system was actually reduced to a few good relationships with peers and 2 staff members that made a huge difference for me. And on top of that, I was also very skeptical about disclosing anything to do with my mental health with the institution that I was studying at, under fear of being discriminated against further. So I think there isn't so much consideration for international neurodivergent students' needs when it comes to giving them access to resources to support for their mental well-being.
So just to double check the acronyms, GAD here is generalised anxiety disorder?
Yeah,
cool.
Correct.
That means you would have been at Oxford at similar times, just at different unis, which I always find we just missed each other.
I know.
Yeah, I used to climb at Brooks. I used to use the gym there. It's like,
Really?
It's quite a nice uni. I don't get why people are so mean to it. So you mentioned, obviously, international students and access to basically knowing the definitions of the Equality Act. Why do you think international students are less aware of the Equality Act and the legal rights that they have?
I think, well, my case was that I'd come from a different country, right? And I had been in the UK for 6 years, but I never really realized that the fact that I had depression and anxiety and potentially other underlying diagnoses that I might not know of actually could be classified as a disability under the Equality Act. And it wasn't until I was pushed to the edge that I needed the support system set in place. And therefore, it wasn't until then that I realized, oh, okay, maybe I can access support. But at the same time, I was debating with myself, wait a second, am I disabled? Am I neurodivergent? And I think it might be that because we come from a different culture that sometimes is full of stigma, or it might be like there's no acceptance in that culture of what a disability is. We might even have different words for disability that don't mean the same thing. And maybe you're not used to talking about mental health beyond the boundaries of your home, or maybe even you can't talk about mental health with your family or about disability. So that makes it like, I don't like to use internalized ableism, but it might be that you are from a cultural background that is not aware of all these complexities. And that means that we might not want to disclose these to institutions, or because it could lead to further stigma and discrimination or exclusion. So yeah, I think the reason why international students aren't aware is also because the institutions that welcome us in the country don't inform us of everything that we need to know. Like, I never once had someone come up to me and say, oh, what are your needs? Like, what do you need to flourish in this environment? Like, what are your needs in terms of academic needs? But then there's the other side of the coin, which is sometimes you don't need academic needs. You need people to behave properly and ethically without like targeting and bullying, because that's what pushed me to the edge. And yeah, so I think international students face an extra challenge because they're intersectional. They might not just have a disability. They're also international and from a different culture, from a different religion with different beliefs. And on top of that, you might be a woman as well. So there's all those layers that can create complexity in terms of how institutions can support you as well, because they don't understand intersectionality. A lot of the people working in disability might not understand it from a lived experience, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess one thing that got me thinking about, so I'm not an international student in the slightest, but do you think there was a difference between kind of social definitions of disability and what that meant for people, and then the legal definition? Was that like, did that add another layer of confusion, do you think?
Yes, absolutely. Because in some contexts, like to give you a brief example, I never spoke about mental health beyond the confines of my home. I kept it between myself, my parents, my psychiatrist, and the institution, like school, that I might need to access requirements for. But there is all this thing about sharing, because the diagnosis is very personal and it's a personal choice to share it. But in an institutional context, they almost force you to share information that you shouldn't have to share, in terms of anything to do with things you might be taking or experiences you've had. They're so personal. Why should an institution have access to those? They should provide the support under the Equality Act, independent of how you see yourself. Whether I see myself as disabled or not, it's up to me. But if I'm effectively disabled under some country's law where I'm studying and I need the right support, I should access that support. So I think, yeah, the social model of disability for me at this moment in time is much more relevant because we've had the medical model for so many years. So to me, the social model, it kind of states that it's the environment that is disabling us. It's not something inherently deficient with the person. So for me, I'm really in line with that. And I think that makes a huge difference. But institutions are unaware of the social model, maybe, and base everything on very clinical, pathologizing language and medicalized language. And oh, you need a diagnosis. I don't think you even need a diagnosis. If you know yourself, most people will know themselves better than anyone else. They know what they need. People know what they need. So if you ask them, and provide for them, then you're operating under the Equality Act. But yeah, the social definition versus the legality of it can be quite a good conversation. But I don't know if you want to dive into it because it might be a long. It might be long.
Yeah, we might have quite a fun discussion, which is fine, but we've very clearly defined what we want to talk about today. Let's see if we have some time later, and we can always come back. If not, if people want to see it, they can tell us. And then we can do something else, I guess. Right. This is something that we've kind of alluded to already, but I know that you want to discuss more in depth. As a result of what was happening at uni and your knowledge of the Equality Act and everything that was going on at once, did you encounter any obstacles during your experience of higher education? Did you overcome them? And if so, how?
Okay. Yeah. So I did encounter multiple challenges. And like I said, including with social interactions with peers. But it wasn't just that. It was also the bureaucratic and I would even say, in some ways, ineffective and even discriminatory system of complaints at university. The system is, in my view, I don't know, it might vary from uni to uni, but it was, in my view, rigged against disabled students and even more so against disabled international students. And I could even go further and say against invisibly disabled international students. Here's a quote from a response to a complaint I put forward. As you did not provide the university with evidence that you had a disability that met the criteria within the Equality Act, the university did not have a duty to you as a disabled student, and therefore did not fail to comply with the Equality Act. So in essence, what this university claims is that I had to prove that I had the disability through evidence and disclose personal information to get the right support. For those of us with invisible disabilities, for example, this is particularly challenging. And luckily, I had prescriptions of medication to prove that I had, in fact, what is defined as a disability in the Equality Act. But it begs further questions such as, what if you don't have proof? Or what if you're denied access to support, but you need that support? That was what made me realize, whoa, okay, there's something going on here that is not right. I should get support independent of having proof of a disability and independent of having to disclose personal and private information about my disability. So that's like the bureaucratic system is, in essence. It's also the lack of lived experience, perhaps, or knowing lived experience of disabled students that hinders the process to run smoothly and in support of the disabled person. Yeah.
I have a quick question about this, actually. So whenever I kind of talk about advocacy, I'm from a very British cultural background. I have always encouraged disclosure because I don't, like, this is the thing I don't want happening to people, right? But also, I don't have that international perspective of why that might be tricky. And I guess it's finding that balance of duty of care versus disclosure and cultural differences, which the university might not consider. Could you, honestly, because I'm curious and I want to learn, could you just tell me a little bit more about kind of, how would I ask this?
To be honest with you, I can tell you that the fact that I was digesting whether I'm disabled or neurodivergent or not And I was having discussions with my family. Have you thought maybe I'm disabled? At home, the tone is, no, you're not. There's nothing wrong with you. What are you talking about? But then at school, it's like, I need support. And they won't give me the support unless I classify myself as disabled. So, what that in essence does to a person is it drifts them off their sense of self identity.
Yeah.
Like your self identity is put into question. And that can really throw you off mental stability. So you kind of have to make peace with yourself and ask yourself who you are as a person and if those labels matter at all to you, and if it's a label or if it goes beyond that, if it's a means to get support. But in cultures where there's not as much accessibility and information about disability, and where the definition of disability itself is different, you have to be wary of disclosure.
Yeah.
That's why for an international students, it's hard to disclose when they come to the UK and need support. But it also depends on your environment at home, your family, whether it's taboo to talk about things, whether it's not. So all these things are about intersectionality. And it's actually interesting because when discrimination happens, it could potentially happen on more than one category according to the Equality Act. And that's part of Section 14, which is a provision. It's not come into effect yet. I don't think so. But it states that there is a possibility of dual discrimination according to more than one category within the Equality Act. And that's where intersectionality comes into play. So you're not just being discriminated because you're disabled, you're also being discriminated because you might be from a different culture or belief system. So, yeah, I think the experience itself is awful because you lose the sense of self-identity and you're worried about defining yourself in a society, in two societies, first of all. That's the one you come from and the one you're in.
Yep.
So it's very concerning because if you lose your sense of self, you're in essence non-existent inside. You know what I mean? It's like it can draw you into a deep depression. That's what happened to me. So it drew me into a 5-year-long depression. So yeah, it can be very disconcerting.
Yeah, and that can be hard to get out of. Do you think so what I'm understanding here is that you didn't feel like you had to disclose anything because you had things that you were struggling with, but you wouldn't have necessarily defined yourself as disabled based on where you came from. Do you think, I can see you nodding, do you think if you had come to the UK with the knowledge of the Equality Act that you had, that you would have applied for support, or do you think it would have still been kept as personal information to you?
I think if I had had that conversation with someone, because I was lucky I had a mentor. I got put with a mentor after 3 months of not having any mentorship. So I got put with a mentor who was really good. And we had that conversation. I was able to express myself. And luckily that mentor was really aware of international experiences. I was lucky that another member of staff actually put me with that mentor, made sure I got adjustments. And this is the thing. It's like if you have space to have that conversation about self-identity, about disability, what is disability in your context, what is disability in this country, then I would have definitely applied for a DSA. I would have definitely asked for student support before I got to the uni. But again, that doesn't replace social interaction. And that was my problem. It was the social interactions with peers were not the best. So
yeah,
that also hinders you. It's not just getting adjustments. That's nice. And it's good to have set in place and a support system. But if you have positive social interaction, you're more prone to flourish.
Yeah.
You don't need to have adjustments necessarily. I mean, I'm speaking from my personal experience, but of course, at times before in school, I had to have adjustments. But again, it was because I was pushed to the edge and I was burnt out. So I couldn't accomplish work in the same amount of time. I had to get extensions because of that burnt out that actually came from social interaction in my experience. So, yeah.
I mean, people will always be people. I guess the idea is how can we offset maybe some of that, the stress that can come from social interaction. And in education, I guess that's the reasonable adjustments they offer academically and mentoring. So even in those situations, in my opinion, they're still very necessary. Before we move on, do you have anything else you wanted to talk about for any obstacles that you faced?
Yeah, I think you can just, like, if you tell an institution, I need this, you don't need to give details of why. You're telling the institution, I need this support. Access to work doesn't need a diagnosis. Why should in universities you need to prove that you have a disability? So that was another thing I wanted to talk about. The last thing I want to say is during higher education, I was meant to also do other things, but I didn't because of bullying and I dropped out of some of the things. So yeah, that's another thing.
Yeah.
And that's why there's no representation of disabled people in, let's say, society committees or in leadership positions, because often we get targeted and bullied and then we drop out. We don't want to put up with it because we already know we have limited time and disposition to deal with these things. So yeah.
Yeah. And I guess it's even harder when, say, if you're masking, for example, but you don't know the culture, what's your comparison? What are you masking against? And like,
Yeah.
who knows, right? And it's that too, and the energy that can go into it. And if you have an energy limiting condition, your time is going to be better spent elsewhere, to be honest.
Yeah.
But it sucks because if you focus just on academics, you just kind of fall into a study hole and you need a break. You need something like that. I've had really important conversations with people about that on the show before. Eleanor, I think, was a great example, like episode 3 or something, and how that can help so much in breaking things up. So it's always such a shame and does so much worse for people when they're pushed out of those like positions in university societies, which rather aptly brings us to our next question. Were there any clubs, societies, or initiatives that made a significant difference to your experience of higher education?
Yeah, so I was actually meant to be the co-president of the Architecture Society that year. But like I said, due to bullying in the committee, I decided to drop out of that role. And this actually explains, like I said, why representation and presence of disabled voices in leadership positions is often not as much, because we get targeted, discriminated, and bullied, and the burden is so much that we quit.
Yeah.
But I was attending sports societies as well, so I was doing dance, and that was quite helpful, actually. I enjoyed that. I like mixing with a different crowd of people. And societies are a good way to meet other people. So that gave me a peace of mind. And yeah, dance and sports helps you physically and mentally. But you might able to find a support network elsewhere outside your course through the society. So that was quite good too. But yeah, not the one I was meant to be co-president, I just dropped out. So yeah.
That's a shame because obviously you've put a lot of, like, architecture takes a lot of energy. So if you want to get involved in that way, then like I'm surprised that people aren't just taking precedence, because you see, like, at least sometimes when I'm on social media, it's people staying up until midnight working on models and things like that. And like people, like architects are already stressed. Like I'm surprised that they didn't just want someone to help. But on the other hand, what style of dance did you do? I'm just curious.
So I've been dancing since I was really young. I stopped now, but I used to do ballet, and I was doing yoga as well. So yoga was really helpful with breathing. And but yeah, I was doing ballet. But that's not like I like contemporary more. So they had ballet and contemporary. It was just dance society, I think. So you could do multiple types of dance, but my favorite is contemporary dance.
Contemporary school. I also did some ballet growing up. It's fine, but it's very formal. And contemporary is just very fun.
I know, yeah.
So,
yeah, for sure.
Next question is one that I ask all of my guests. The answer can be wonderful and in-depth. The answer can be no. So, answer however you please. Have you experienced any instances of your disability, or I guess if you want to define it as a disability, that's fine, or I guess it'd be a neurodivergence or a long-term health condition. Did you find it proved helpful at any point during university?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, well, maybe not during higher education, but having had those experiences in higher education prepared me for the real world, I would say. The real world.
In big quotation marks.
In big quotation marks. The world of working 9 to 5, I guess. I mean, I'm very lucky. I work from home, so I get to pace myself a bit better when I work from home. I also think that it's gotten me this far and it's gotten me into starting NAN. So yeah, having a disability proves helpful in the sense that you can understand yourself better and you can understand others. In the event of a challenge, you're more resilient as well. I think that resilience is something that is really, I mean, when you go through waves of depression, you need to be resilient to keep going, to keep waking up in the morning, getting out of bed, eating something to help you with the anxiety as well. And so, like, sometimes it's physical. Like, if you don't eat something, you feel more anxious. Like, you need people beside you to give you the support. But when you're by yourself in a different country and you don't have that much of a support network, you don't have someone to drag you out of bed and to give you food when you're heavily depressed, it can be a big challenge. So that's why for me, it didn't do me that good in higher education, because there was no support network there at the time. And also it was during COVID too. So we were all stranded in like islands or bubbles or in our homes. It makes you remember the small acts of kindness from people. And that is really helpful. And that gives you a vision of the world that is more holy, I would say, than someone who never went through something like that. And I think that's the power of disability and health condition, neurodivergence, and maybe even other characteristics that might lead you to face challenges, is you become more resilient and stronger, and it gives you a better sense of what life is. But it's, until when can we push people to say and say, oh, but you'll be more resilient? Yeah, but maybe we should all either be more resilient and kinder to each other, or not need to be that much more resilient than the average person, right? The experiences can be diverging even within the disability community and within the neurodivergent community. So that's something interesting to think about and to act on, because you become more compassionate. And that's why the experiences I had in higher education helped me outside higher education.
I'm going to be honest, you read my mind there. I was literally, as you were starting that question, I was thinking about at what point is resilience something that comes, I guess, part and parcel with some mental health conditions and neurodivergences, and at what point are we just saying that resilience is effectively coming from the struggles caused by systematic failures?
Yeah.
Where is that line? And I don't know if we should be celebrating that necessarily. Yeah, so I mean, there's so much that you learn as you go, and it's almost unfortunate that happens, because there's the complaints process, there's the definitions of disability, and a lot of what ifs. But it's hard to linger on them because you were doing the best with what you had at the time. And you know, things can only help you as much as you know, and it's truly that like knowledge is power. And
Yeah.
Right. Time to plug your stuff, which I'm very excited for. So what are you doing nowadays? As we've mentioned, you've graduated from university now. So what are you doing nowadays, and how have your past experiences in higher education affected this?
After the experience in higher education, I basically figured that there was no support network for neurodivergent architecture students and for professionals and educators. So I looked and I was trying to figure out, okay, is there something to do in neurodiversity in architecture, or maybe like a network? And in the end, I just decided I should start something. So initially, we started as a group of few people, and we delivered a workshop at the AA on the new standards. And
What's the AA? I have untrained ears, sorry.
oh, sorry. And the Architectural Association, which was where I did my second master's. So
Cool. Keep going, sorry.
no, that's fine. So yeah, AA sounds like something else. So
Sounds like a roadside rescue service.
yeah.
So I didn't think it was that. I just wanted to check.
Yeah, no, it's the Architectural Association. So
Cool,
yeah, so thanks to that workshop, we started doing more things. In essence, we just want to have a support network for people who might not have that support network in architecture. So it's for anyone who's interested in neurodiversity in architecture. It's for neurodivergent architecture students, educators, professionals. And yeah, I also currently work full-time as an architectural assistant. So yeah, that is what I've been up to. And like the network is a result of my past experiences in education and wanting to do something about it. I think that's quite empowering as well. But it only came about like 6 years after the event, because for 6 years I was diving into deep depression and anxiety, and like you said, something not to be celebrated by the sort of set of conditions we're put through.
Let's call it bad resilience.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm glad I came out of it, but I don't think I could have done it without the help of people around me and supporting me. On my own, like, I think people were driven towards things. Like, I didn't even do, like, in those 6 years, I didn't even do anything related with neurodiversity. I was doing a different master's in urbanism. And I thought that was helpful because it put my mind off things. I said, okay, my identity kind of goes beyond all the stuff I went through. And it puts your mind off of things that might have been in a flashback. It might have been not the best experience. So because we're human beings, we are changing, ever changing. We have more than one capacity. So I do have an interest in sustainability as well. And that's where we met. Like, we were talking about sustainability and ecoableism. And I think the overlap between disability and sustainability is quite interesting. So yeah, that's what I was doing during those 5 years. I was working, and then I was doing my second master's. And then after the end of that, I was like, what next? What drives me in life? What's the purpose of this? And that's when I was like, okay, I'm going to go back to the whole neurodiversity thing in architecture and start the network.
That's cool. A couple of notes on that. I think this is like the third time in 3 interviews I need to shout out Murren again, who was a wonderful guest, who was on a panel about ecoableism and invited me to that event. I think when we recorded, if you listen back, I said that I would be there, and then I met you and I met some other wonderful people. So I need to extend her more thanks. She's also helping me with other stuff right now. So
that's really nice.
Legend. What a legend.
Yeah, absolutely. Maureen is great.
She is great. I also just want to say, so we've spoken about Nan. I will be linking the Instagram in the description of the show. So if anyone is interested in catching up or getting in touch with Nan, then you can do so there.
Yeah.
Is very excited. Also, the fact you're doing Nan while working as an architectural assistant, and I know you've been doing trade shows this week as well. My apologies, only adds to my stereotype that architects don't sleep. Please sleep.
Yeah.
Please sleep. Right. Let's get back to some more serious stuff. The big crux of this episode was about you writing a complaint and kind of not knowing your rights necessarily as an international student. And you didn't know where your definition of disability fit. And I honestly think we've had a really nice discussion out of this because it's not something I was knowingly ignorant to. I'm a very British student, and I'm really glad that we got to have that conversation. So in light of that, what advice would you give to people, especially international disabled students, whatever niche you want to pick? What advice would you give to people navigating a complaint?
Yeah, so the thing I would do when navigating a complaint is gather your evidence, get advice, and act fast. Because most university procedures allow you to submit additional evidence within a short time frame. And another reason why I think the system is rigged, since most of us might be physically or mentally drained and in shock, is because we're not being able to act quickly and to those time frames that are set by the institution. As soon as you have exhausted all the university complaint system, submit a complaint to the OIA, the Office of Independent Educator, and the university might be a member. They might be able to work together to get you what you need and what is within the legal framework. So yeah, that's my advice for navigating a complaint.
Can I add some things?
Yeah, go for it.
As someone who's had to go through some spicy complaints, if you want to hear about that, listen to the anniversary episode. Oh my God. So when we say get evidence, get it in writing. Get it in writing that you can pull back. Emails are incredible. If your email address for university is expiring, back it up. Make sure you have that evidence. If what you heard was over a phone call, get them to confirm what they said in writing. There's some laws about recording in the UK. I wouldn't necessarily advise recording conversations, but there should be ways for people to email information to you from a phone call, just so you have it in writing as evidence. And I mentioned this in the anniversary episode. I'll say it again here. If someone takes too long to process a complaint at university, for example, they could take 114 days instead of 30, then you might be able to get compensation for the amount of time they made you wait. So if you've been waiting for a disproportionate amount of time to hear back from your university, definitely chase them for the distress caused by you having to wait, because that is something that they can and honestly should recompense you for.
Yeah.
Maybe we should just do a guide on complaints. That'd be great.
That'd be such a great idea. I wish I had access to one, because there was no, I was going through it without knowing what I was doing. And luckily I had some people advising me, like my parents or other people, make sure you get it in writing, make sure you have all these emails. And I knew myself, you need to get it in writing, you need to get it in emails. And I kept backing my emails up as well. So I still have all the evidence. I think the biggest evidence, though, for me was the response to the complaint. Because sometimes you can try to work with the university. And I think that would be, at the end of the day, we're dealing with people who are trying to understand what your needs are. Supposedly, they know that you have the rights, and supposedly they should know the legal framework as well. That's why they should have been hired for that job, because they are aware of what it is, lived experience, etc. But for an international student, it might be a bit harder to navigate the system. If you don't know it, if you haven't lived in the country since you were born.
I think it's more than that. I think it's if you haven't had to come from a position where you know the law. Now, I was raised by a lawyer, so I knew what I was doing from the moment I stepped foot. I also had some kind of adverse experiences applying for university from school, but I appreciate that's a very fortunate position. And it gets to the point where I think when I was doing student voice, I had UK students asking me, and it was like, ooh, I wasn't expecting this, but maybe we should chat about that in the future.
Yeah, it sounds good.
In the meantime, we are on our last question, Luisa. So we've spoken a lot today about a lot of things, primarily intersectionalities between cultures and disability, and at some points possibly even gender identity, and also what you've built from that, which has been wonderful. The NAN's great. Again, it's linked in the description. But if we were to take your story and consolidate it, what is one key takeaway that you would like listeners to remember from your story?
Yeah. So I think the one key takeaway is to find a support network and get informed about your rights when you go into university in a different place from where you're originally from and where your support network originally is. That's the one key takeaway. Know your rights and find a support network, because you never know like what might happen in a different place where you don't have access to a support network locally. So
yeah, I mean, it will depend on the uni where you find that. A lot of them will be societies. If you're like Oxbridge or York or Durham or another collegiate university, you'll find it through your colleges potentially. But also, if you're struggling to find a sense of community and you're like an international student specifically, a lot of students' unions run things for international students, at least in my experience. Same with disabled students. There's usually a disabled students network where one hopefully still exists. I know some unis have had trouble with finding disability officers, but look to where you will most logically find people. And then if not, I just try to find societies with a very low cost of entry where their entire purpose is just being social and hanging out.
Yeah.
Because, worst case scenario, you hang out on your own and you just enjoy the ambiance. Best case scenario, you make some great friends. I'm still in touch with some friends from like Tea Society, for example.
Oh, that's cool. You had Tea Society.
It's great. It was £1 and I didn't have much money and I was like, I need people. And then I was secretary 2 weeks later. And I didn't pay for sessions after that, which is quite nice.
That's quite good.
Yeah. You know what? If you want more tips like that, go to the money guide from last week for the ADHD survival guide. You can find more tips there.
Yeah.
Right, Louisa, that's the end of the questions. I'm going to just close up and then we can just keep chatting off show, I guess. So the HE Enable podcast is the show dedicated to sharing the experiences of disabled and neurodivergent people, as well as those with long-term health conditions in the UK higher education system. I am still actively looking for guests to come onto the show in December. If you meet that criteria, whether you're a student, professional services staff, support staff, academic, researcher, whether you graduated years ago or you're still there, I don't care. Please do get in touch via the email heenabled@gmail.com. It is at the bottom of the link tree in the show description. And if you like what you hear, please consider supporting the show on Patreon. There currently are no backer perks because I am just trying to get out these episodes as I edit them. Eventually, I would like to do early episode access when I have the capacity. In the meantime, you would just be supporting the show and the good things I hope it does. Right. Louisa, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's been a pleasure. Cheers.